Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Into the Wild. Today, we're going to be talking about the genetics of skunks and bears. My name is Amrita, your host, and we also have Julia with us, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name's Julia Owen-Orcutt. I am a PhD candidate at UC Davis. Let's see, I'm in the graduate group in ecology here, and my lab is called the Mammalian Ecology and Conservation Unit, and it is run by my PI, Ben Sachs.
Awesome. we're really excited to have you here. And I'm just gonna start right off the bat. Since you said that you're a PhD student, and a researcher, I wanted to know, what does it mean to be a wildlife researcher to you, and what does it mean to do field work?
Okay, awesome. And thanks, Aretha, for having me on the podcast. I'm super happy to be on. And I love that you're doing this. This is very cool.
Thank you.
Um, okay, so first question. What was the first question? Sorry.
No, you're good. What does it mean to you to be a researcher, and what does it mean to do field work to you?
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. To be a researcher, well, first of all, it's so much fun. I feel like kind of the main kind, like foundational meaning to me really is that I am basically signing myself up to be a lifelong learner, right? Because by definition, we're really just using the scientific method to, come up with questions and, develop ways to conduct research and collect data and analyze that data to try and answer some of those questions, which leads to more questions. And we're focused on doing that primarily for wildlife species. But in general, it really just is reinforcing this aspect of lifelong learning that I think is super exciting for me. I think I'm the type of person who, while I like I don't need every day to be some wild adventure. I think it's really important for me to feel like I'm constantly growing as a person and constantly learning new things about the world around me, and kind of making my life decisions informed by like the nature that's around us. So I think that's just like a really important aspect of life to me in general, like consistent learning. And it's something that I know I'm confident that I will get to enjoy for the rest of my life in a career like this. So that's kind of like a driving aspect of research for me.
Mm-hmm.
And because, to be honest, wildlife researchers, I don't think you really do it for the money.
No.
You do it for the richness of life.
Yes.
Um, yeah, totally. And my experience through graduate school and really getting to experience that process of performing research and writing it up and communicating research has been so wonderful. And I just feel so lucky that I'm able to do this. Yeah, especially as I'm the first person in my family to graduate from college.
Wow.
And so now going on to this like next step and having this big adventure. And sometimes, especially lately, as I'm coming to the end of my PhD, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, I can't believe that I'm gonna get to do this for the rest of my life. This is not just like a class project that's gonna end and then I'm gonna go have to find some corporate job.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which there's nothing wrong with that. Like people who enjoy that kind of more predictable and like uh just that type of work environment, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But for me, I just feel like so excited and happy to be in this field.
That's awesome. And yes, wildlife is a very unpredictable, fun field. Um, and I feel like this ties into what it means to do field work, because that can also be very unpredictable. And I wanted
Totally.
you to share your experiences on field work, and what does it mean to do field work for you?
Yeah. Okay. So I think research in general, it's kind of like you do all of this background literature review, and you really are kind of trying to home in on what's like the really valuable question that you want to ask, and how are you going to find ways to ask and answer that question. So, in that way, it's predictable because you're kind of building this process. But then I feel like field work is a totally different aspect of learning
Mm-hmm.
where you are definitely learning things that are way less predictable. And even just like, particularly for wildlife, I think there's something special about getting to experience the environment that your study species lives in. And that is
Yeah.
kind of something that you can't really predict what that's going to feel like or what you're going to learn from that. Um, yeah. So I feel like the field work part, yeah, is definitely more of an exciting kind of less predictable type of learning. But in general, I mean, you're out there for a purpose. You're out there to collect whatever samples are going to help you answer whatever questions that you have.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, as a researcher, you have a responsibility to not like damage the surroundings that you're in, right? We're
Yes.
like really trying to just sample out of nature without impacting that
Yes.
nature. Yeah.
Especially with, I think when I took field methods, Dr. Smith would always say, you want to create the most minimal disturbance to the area you're in and leave
Hmm.
it in the same condition it was before you were there. Even though that's impossible, I guess,
Yeah.
but you still have to try to reach that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is impossible, but it's like for both the quality of the wildlife and the nature that you're in, and also the quality of your research, you want to have as little impact as possible because you
Hmm.
don't want to be influencing
Exactly.
the samples or data you're collecting. And then obviously, as somebody who should respect and be a responsible steward of wild spaces, you also don't want to have an impact that way. But yeah, it is impossible. Like I even think about, and I know we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I had a project where I was studying black bears in the
Yes.
Tahoe Basin. And one thing that's really cool about my lab is that we do a lot of non-invasive sampling. So what that means is we're using things like fecal samples or hair samples rather than more invasive methods like collecting tissue from an animal. Although
Hmm.
we do that, and also in another research project of mine, I do use tissue samples,
Hmm.
but it is cool to be able to um, still do the type of research or do some of the research that we do using non-invasive samples. But so my bear project was a non-invasive approach where I spent a good amount of time out in the Tahoe Basin collecting bear scats.
Awesome. Must have been stinky.
Yeah, it's so cool. So cool. And saw so many bears, which was really neat. But even that, I'm like, okay, so yes, I'm not directly interacting with bears. I'm not like I'm trying to be out of the way and just collecting the scats that they leave behind, but I definitely still have an impact. Like I'm sure if the bear was in the area, I'm leaving my scent behind, so like it knows a human was there. Also,
Hmm.
like when I see bears, sometimes they see me too. So it's like we are having some kind of interaction, and so it's really hard to not leave any kind of footprint. But yeah, I think it's super important to try not to.
Awesome. And since you already started talking about it, you'd mentioned that you did research on bears. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So this was a project that happened in like my first couple years of graduate school, and I thought that I was going to be studying bears for my dissertation, and that ended up not being the case. It ended up there was some issues with the funding after the first year. So it really just ended up being this kind of extra side project, which I'm super grateful for though, because it was such a great experience and a really
Hmm.
kind of good gateway into graduate school. And I didn't do a master's, so this is almost like my master's experience before I changed research projects and then my newer research is what's going to be my dissertation. But this bear project, yeah, my goal was to estimate the density of black bears in the Tahoe Basin. And this really developed as a partnership with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife,
Hmm.
where the Tahoe Basin gets so many bears. So this is really not a project that was focused in conservation. It was
Hmm.
more of a management question.
I see.
Um, yeah. So like how many bears are there? Because we know there's a lot, there are a lot of problem bears. I'm sure you've heard about what was it? Oh, like maybe last summer, a couple summers ago, Hank was like a big
Yes.
problem bear. Yeah.
Yes, I remember Hank.
Yes. And it's tough because people do tend to think like, oh, I have this one bear who, always comes in my yard and they're like I basically know that bear, they're the ones that are always coming into my yard or wherever it is. And really, it's very difficult to tell black bears apart. Um, they do come in a range of different colors, but when you have two bears that are pretty much the same color, it's
Yeah.
like kind of impossible just with the naked eye to be able to tell them apart.
Hmm.
And they often have like a patch of light color hair on their chest.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I've heard many people say, like, oh no, I know it's the bear because it has this patch on its chest. And I'm thinking, like, yeah, actually a lot of black bears, or it's not, uncommon for black bears to have that. So really, that person who thinks that they're encountering this one bear is probably encountering many or at least a few. And because these bears are so um, close to and like just all surrounding both the urban area and wildland areas, it was important for CDFW to kind of understand how to be able to come up with an estimate for the number of bears in the area and how to do that in a way that can be done, year after year or whenever they need to in a way that's not going to impact the urban human population. Because traditionally, or like often, to study bears non-invasively, you'll use hair snares. And a hair snare is a great way to get hair, and you can get DNA from the hair follicle.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, yeah, that's like a pretty common method. Uh, but in a human-dominated environment, like for instance, South Lake Tahoe,
Hmm.
hair snares are not going to be great in urban areas because,
Yes.
dogs can get caught in them, kids, they're a danger to kids. So our goal was to develop a way to use fecal samples to then estimate how many bears are in the area, which fecal samples are also used for this often, but I think it just wasn't super well developed for the bears in the Tahoe Basin specifically.
So what do you do after once you get the fecal samples? I'm assuming you take them back to the lab.
Yeah, definitely. So, for this project, it's not just taking the fecal samples. We are also recording, or I say we, but really I did all of the field work for this, so I will go ahead and say I. Um, I recorded my tracks of like where I was hiking in order to find the fecal samples. And I guess maybe I'll back up a step because the first step is to kind of create a map for your study site. And we use the grid. We essentially overlaid a grid on top of the whole Tahoe Basin and then
Okay.
randomly selected grid cells.
Okay.
And then I knew which grid cells I needed to go and sample, and I needed to make sure that I had an equal effort in all of the grid cells that I was going to go sample. So I'm recording my tracks. I'm collecting the fecal samples and recording the location of those fecal samples. And then I came back to the lab with all my samples and I extract DNA from them.
Hmm.
So that looks like large chunks of their scat because their scat is giant. And what we do is we take the outside of the scat off because the idea is that as the scat is moving through their digestive system, it's also collecting a lot of epithelial cells
Oh,
from the bear's intestine on the
okay.
outside of that scat. Yeah.
Hmm.
So then once the scat is deposited by the bear and then I collect it, I'm really looking to kind of target that bear's epithelial cells to then extract the bear's DNA.
Okay. I see. So that's basically how people are able to do genetic testing from poop. I
Mhm.
didn't know that that's where they got the genetic information. I didn't know it was from the epithelial cells of the intestine.
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cool that you can do that. And then we use they're called primers, and so we're like targeting specific areas of the bear's DNA that we know are, belonging to the bear and not the like things that the bear is eating.
Okay. I see.
Yeah.
That's true.
And I mean, there
You,
are other ways to use scat. Like we do a lot of what's called metabarcoding. And
Mhm.
essentially that's just like placing a little barcode on all of the different species that may be in a scat. So whether that's like, um, bugs or plants or other animals,
Mhm.
we can also use the DNA of whatever is inside of the scat to kind of look at what that animal is eating.
Oh, I see. That's so cool.
Yeah,
Poop can tell you a lot, I
yeah,
guess.
it can. Yeah, scat is so informative. Oh, I mean, even like for humans, right? Like
Yes.
our wastewater is
Mhm.
like extremely informative, although sometimes scary. Important to know what's going on in our societies by studying our own scats.
Yeah, I mean, I know that during the pandemic, the school was testing dorm sewage water for COVID.
Hmm.
And a vet from the vet school told me that they found avian flu in the sewage of dorm water.
Ugh, yeah,
Nobody knows how it got there, but
yeah,
I thought that was interesting.
super interesting and definitely good to know. Although, again, like, yeah, it's kind of scary.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
so Bear Project, I guess we'll just like kind of the next step. Um, I'll round out that study really quick.
yes.
So we used this approach called spatially explicit capture recapture or seeker.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a statistical modeling approach. So basically combining the um, bear samples, which the whole point of using DNA for this study was to identify individuals. So DNA can be used for
Oh,
a lot of different things, but this particular use was all I wanted to do was know like which individuals I had samples of and how many times I resampled those
I
individuals.
see, I see.
Yeah. So then I combined that with like the spatial aspect of where I collected and how far I walked,
Mm-hmm.
to combine into like making a estimate of the density of bears in the area.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
that's how you guys were able to figure out the number of individuals, I guess, or you extrapolated basically from that sample size.
Yeah, exactly right. So it's not like I collected samples from every bear, but of of the bears that I sampled, the number of times I sampled them and in the areas that I sampled,
Mhm.
yeah, we were able to kind of extrapolate out into the rest of the basin. And figure out what we already know. There's a whole lot of bears in Tahoe.
Do you remember how many bears you estimated there would be in the basin?
Oh, I think, gosh, it's funny because I feel like I definitely should know off the top of my head, but I think it's like somewhere around 500
Oh my God.
in the whole basin. Yeah.
That's a
It
lot.
it was a lot for sure. And yeah, I do have a paper out on that, so I could pull it up, but maybe I'll just encourage people to go look it up.
Yes, I can also link it in the description for
Yeah,
people.
sounds great.
Yes. You had mentioned that bears wasn't the only large mammal or mammal you worked on. What other animals did you work on? Or work with, rather?
Yeah, so the bear one was a big one. Right now I'm studying spotted skunks, as you know, because I
Yes.
talked about it a lot in class. Um, I also did I like as an undergraduate, I definitely helped on some projects. My undergraduate project was on coyotes in the Sierra Nevada.
Hmm.
And then I also like helped on coyote projects, helped on a elk project, on a Thule elk project. But yeah, for me personally, the bears and the skunks are the biggest ones.
So what is the current research with skunks about and what are you doing with skunks?
Yes. Okay. Oh my gosh. So exciting to me. So spotted skunks, I'll start by saying that spotted skunks are a thing, and not everybody knows that there are striped skunks and also spotted skunks.
Yes.
Yeah. Were you aware about spotted skunks before our class?
Yes, I watch
Okay, cool.
animal documentaries.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was gonna say, I feel like that makes total sense, but many people are totally unaware that there is a spotted version of a skunk. And spotted skunks are much smaller than striped skunks, like full grown, like way different sizing wise. They're super, super small. And they do this very cute, I guess I shouldn't say cute, but it is my like anthropogenic mind taking over. It's really cool though. They do this handstand when
Oh,
they're threatened because they spray as well, but they will spray like from handstand position.
have you ever been sprayed? Just wondering.
No, not well, okay. So I guess talking field work, I didn't do I didn't do nearly close to all of the field work for this project. I guess I probably didn't do any of the field work because the field work that I didn't use those specific samples. But
Oh.
I went out and got to do some of the same field work that I benefited from by like getting tissue samples. And what you do is you have like a plastic bag with you.
Yes.
And yeah, and I guess I'll mention that this field work was done by the Nature Conservancy and NPS.
Okay.
They are kind of the stewards of the area that I study. So they awesome field techs would go out and for years they've been collecting samples. And so I got sent them, which is great. But a part of my PhD journey, I got to go and do some sampling with them, which was fantastic. So they showed me how to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And they have this like essentially like just a plastic bag along with all of their other um, stuff that they need for sampling.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're done in these traps. The traps were actually there to study foxes, but they would also just happen to get some spotted skunks
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do, you kind of first of all, you want to throw in a like a leather glove because the skunks will definitely want to bite, like
Yes.
latch onto something. So you let them do that. You get them out of the trap and then immediately put their little rear ends inside of the plastic bag because, yes, they are definitely trying to spray you.
Oh.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so they'll just spray into the plastic bag while you're taking the other samples that you need.
That's
So
smart.
I've never been directly sprayed, but it definitely like that smell is pervasive. Like it
What does it
really
smell
is.
like?
Okay, so it smells really similar to striped skunk
Okay.
spray, but I feel like it smells different up close. Like, I guess I've never smelled a striped skunk spray like up close, but for these spotted skunks at least, it smells like really pungent garlic
Oh.
to
Ew.
me.
That
To
is stinky,
me.
but that is interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So like it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. Like I
Mhm.
am a garlic lover. Not that like it smelled delicious to me or anything, but it was just kind of like, whoa, this is a really intense garlicky smell.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know if I would have the stomach for that intense of a smell of garlic.
Yeah. Well, and it's temporary because then I feel like you're also just so distracted by how cool these animals are.
That is true. I know that when I was in your class with Mammal Lab, I think you did bring out the specimen taxidermy of the spotted skunk, and it
Yeah,
was
definitely.
really cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
beautiful. Their pelage is
it's
just
beautiful.
gorgeous. Yeah, they're such neat animals. And I feel like, I feel super lucky that I get to, first of all, know that they exist. And I've actually gotten to hold one, right? This is definitely the more invasive type of sampling.
Um, Speaking of skunks and your research on them, I wanted to ask you, what did your dissertation, or if you're allowed to talk about it, what does your research concerning skunks pertain, and what does some of the lab work and the research we don't see look like?
Yeah, okay. So my research, at least I'll talk about kind of the main focus of a couple of my chapters is studying the spotted skunks that live on the California Channel Islands.
Okay.
So the Channel Islands are an archipelago of islands off the coast of Southern California, and there are 8 islands, I believe, and 2 of the northern Channel Islands are home to these spotted skunks. Kind of to add some extra excitement about this system is that island foxes also live there. Um,
Yes.
island foxes, they're super cool. I'm not gonna lie. I am not gonna take favorites here because I think they're both really awesome and interesting creatures. But island foxes live on 6 of the Channel Islands, and the same 2 northern Channel Islands that the skunks live on. So it's this kind of neat scenario where you have 2 carnivores living on the islands, and they're competing with one another. It's also um, well, there's been a lot of research done on the island fox. There's been huge conservation efforts, huge successful conservation efforts on the foxes. So there's a lot known about the foxes, but a lot less known about the spotted skunks, which now there are a lot more research focused for the skunks as well. Like I know several people who are studying them on the Northern Islands. But my focus was to look at their genomics. So when I say genomics, I really mean that we're not just looking at a single gene or a handful of genes. We're taking their DNA and we're sequencing everything. And that gives me the ability to look at things like inbreeding. Like I'm looking for patterns of inbreeding.
I
I'm
see.
trying to see, is this population super inbred? Are they potentially suffering from inbreeding depression? I'm trying to understand how long they've been on the islands because that's really unknown. It's like not clear whether they've come to the islands really recently
Hmm.
because they look pretty much the same as mainland spotted skunks. And the spotted skunks on the 2 islands look really similar to one another. So not too long ago, it was just kind of assumed that they came over in recent history, and it's like, they're sure we'll call them a subspecies, but They don't,
Yeah.
probably haven't been there for very long. Um, but with looking at them in a genetics lens, we can kind of uncover more of that story. And true, it looks like yes, they haven't like been on the islands for like hundreds of thousands of years,
Mm-hmm.
but it does look like they've been on the islands like tens of thousands of years instead of
Oh,
just like a couple hundred years.
okay. So they are relatively older native species to to those two islands.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough to say, like, in evolutionary history's perspective, they are brand new, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
obviously, yes.
yes, yes. But yeah, they have been there for longer than maybe we would have thought based off of morphology alone. Um, and this is especially in contrast to the island fox because the island fox looks quite a bit different than the mainland gray fox.
Yes, they
Like, so
do. Yeah.
yeah, right. They're smaller. They're like a dwarfed, quote unquote,
Hmm.
version of the mainland gray fox. And then on each island, they have some pretty big morphological differences. Like some islands, they have shorter limbs. Some islands, they have shorter tails. So there's a lot going on there. And since we don't really see that as much with the island spotted skunk, then it's tempting to say, well, like, oh, well, maybe they just haven't had enough time there for that to happen.
Hmm.
But we know that it doesn't always work that way. Like, um, yeah, that kind of separation doesn't always mean that a big morphological change is going to happen. So it really is important to also look at the genetics and look at how genetically different these populations are from one another.
Ah, and that is basically what your project was.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's kind of like it feeds in to conservation because essentially when somebody's wanting to do or like a conservation initiative is popping up or like it seems like it would be important to have a conservation initiative. The first thing you need to do is know something about the species or the
Yeah,
environment or whatever it is you're trying to conserve.
exactly.
And yeah, so that's like this really important key or like piece of conservation. And so essentially, my research helps lay that foundation of like, okay, well, this is what we know about the spotted skunk. And it helps identify some gaps and like, okay, this is still what we need to figure out in order to best plan for conservation. So yeah, my research is really helping to lay that foundation.
Awesome. And you did already start delving into some of the applications of this work for conservation. And then I also wanted to know what some of your general views on conservation and mammalogy are in general.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see. I guess, yeah, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about for like skunk
Uh, oh,
specifics, or are we good on that?
Actually, no, I do see one more question here. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, no
What
worries.
was some of the lab work that we don't like? What is
Mhm.
some of the research that wildlife biologists do behind the scenes that the general public doesn't really know about?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. And it's kind of funny because I feel like it's all behind the scenes in a way. And then even the research sometimes, unfortunately, stays behind a paywall. Um, which is difficult, right? That's like a really difficult part of research is
Yeah.
that one goal is that we really want to be able to communicate this research, of course, to the stakeholders, you know, of course, to the people who are involved in the conservation or management of a particular area or species or anything that needs to be conserved, but I think as a scientist, like our goal is also to be able to educate the public because that is really important. But sometimes it's not accessible to the public. And more and more, I think researchers are trying to publish open access like journal articles where they are open and free to the public, but it's really expensive to do. So like if your lab doesn't have that kind of funding, and certainly as a grad student, I'm not going to be able to pay thousands of dollars out of pocket to have an open access journal article. So that's definitely a hurdle.
Yeah.
Yeah. But other than that, like obviously the goal is for the research to be published and available to who needs to see it. And then the behind the scenes stuff, well, I guess most of the behind, or all really of the behind the scenes stuff should be in the journal article that you're publishing. Um, but otherwise, it's just a lot of, I guess what people don't see is like the banging your head against the computer when you're trying to get a program to work or like trying to, understand a certain statistical method.
Yep.
Um,
R coding.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, so this skunk project being a genomics focused project, it comes with like needing to handle a lot of data. And so to do that, I have to use like our campus's cluster. So it's this like supercomputer and like trying to understand the different coding languages and making the programs work and making sure your data is cleaned and you're not biasing it in some way
Hmm.
um, has been such a like challenging learning curve. uh I guess I'll mention like in undergrad, I didn't take any computer science, right? Like that wasn't
Yeah.
really on my
There.
radar as something that I would be using every single day.
Yes.
And so yeah, now I am doing this project that is heavily into bioinformatics, and I have learned, really how to code and how to write scripts and manipulate scripts and
Yes.
figure all of that out. So that's definitely something behind the scenes
Hmm.
that is super important and has been fun. Honestly, it is really fun, but it is super challenging.
Yes, and I think the other thing too is I feel like people they don't really teach in colleges wildlife biologists tech related stuff anyway, and oftentimes I hear people talk about how when they got to grad school it was a huge learning curve for them when they were learning how to run like programs or do their statistical analysis. So I really wish
Yeah,
I did take maybe one or two computer science classes and learn a little bit about some.
totally. And I think that's changing because I mean, I
Maybe
guess I'll
one
just speak
class.
for like the field of genetics and genomics is it is so growing so quickly. There's like it's so technologically advanced and continuing to advance and to
Hmm.
grow and to change so rapidly. So I think that now universities are getting better about that. Like at Davis, I know that we have some like wildlife statistics based courses that
Yes.
are run in like R and um, other languages and things like that. And so, and I didn't take those classes. I don't even know if that was available to me when I was an undergrad,
Ooh.
but certainly I know a lot of my colleagues learned as we went now. So it's good that more resources are becoming available to undergraduates and graduate students. I did have a really cool course in R as a graduate student, which was helpful. But yeah, definitely if anybody is listening who is an undergraduate and interested in wildlife, like do yourself a favor and go
Oh,
take,
yes. Yes.
yeah, some course that's based in computer science or yeah, and or bioinformatics.
I know for at Davis now we have a class WFC 122, which is population dynamics and
Hmm.
estimation, which you do code a lot in R and you do the whole class is just math. So
Yeah, that's great.
it is more geared, when I took it, it was very much more geared towards fishing statistics because of,
Yes.
maximum fishing rates and whatever. But that class was very helpful, and I think we should have more classes like that for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed. Agreed.
Was it
So I'm
not
thinking of like
available
otherwise,
when you were
what's
here?
that?
Was it not available when you were an undergrad? 122?
I guess I don't know, honestly. I couldn't I guess I could pull up my class list. I It probably was. Who teaches that?
I think it's a new professor this quarter, but last year I had Dr. Provost. She taught it,
Okay,
and she was also
cool.
new. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So totally not sure. I did definitely take some great genomics courses that taught a lot about genomics and did approach bioinformatics. But it wasn't done like the students did not have to engage in any R or other programming languages.
I see.
So it was like good to learn about it. Like, okay, this is there. And now, as a grad student using some of these methods, I'm like, oh, that's what they were talking about.
Hmm. Yeah. I absolutely know what you're talking about and what you mean.
Yeah. Yeah. But so yeah, more programming, the better.
Um, I also wanted to know your general thoughts on conservation and what it was like teaching Mammal Lab all these years to students.
Ooh, yes. Oh, I love Mammal Lab. Okay, conservation first. So I think conservation, it's really important. I think like it's easy to think about wildlife conservation and you're just like thinking immediately about the species that you're conserving or the habitat that you're conserving. But I think that taking a step back, conservation is really about humans, um, especially just thinking about the heavy impact that humans have on wildlife. I mean, like literally on the entire earth, right? Like that's the whole reason for conservation is because we are trying to protect something, whether that's like a resource, a species, or even another culture, um, from the heavy, heavy impacts that the dominant cultures have on the planet.
Yes,
And
true.
yeah, so that's kind of to me, that's what conservation is founded in. And otherwise, it's just kind of thinking about like again, developing questions by really learning and doing a lot of research, doing a lot of literature review to come up with the questions that are most important about whatever kind of space or resource or species or culture that you're trying to conserve.
Hmm.
And then carrying out your plan to learn about that thing.
Yes.
And then honestly, it's a whole group effort. It's not like any one person or one lab or even one agency can do everything. Like it's all about collaboration. And so it's important, that we, as scientists and stewards of lands, to really have a mind for communicating with one another because everybody has some type of really important input. And I guess I'm just trying my whole goal in like learning about using DNA to study wildlife is for me to kind of carve out this specialty for myself and say like, okay, I'm going to get really good at using these tools and these specific skills to study wildlife in this way
Hmm.
so that when I'm trying to collaborate and I'm trying to like help people and organizations learn about an animal, like I can contribute in this way. So this is like my little piece of conservation is being able to use DNA to help inform.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think so. It's like I said, I think it's just really right for me. It's this kind of nice combination of like getting to do some field work. Like I mentioned, my skunk project, I didn't really do a ton of field work. I was really fortunate to be sent a lot of the tissue samples that I needed,
Mm-hmm.
but I did still get to go out and, experience the environment that my species lives in, experience the other competitor. I definitely trapped some island foxes as well, which was really, really cool.
Yay!
Yeah. And and so yeah, getting to experience those like rugged environment of the islands was awesome. And so I have that piece, and then I also have the piece of getting to come back to the lab and do a lot of the DNA extractions and do a lot of the preparation that goes into DNA sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to also figure out how to analyze all of this data. So it's like every piece is like a little adventure, honestly. And sometimes that's an adventure that I can embark on from, the comfort of my own home or my
Yeah.
office. And then sometimes I get to like go on these cool journeys and go somewhere I've never been before, like the Channel Islands. So
Yeah.
I just love it.
That sounds fun.
Yeah.
And since you had taught mammalogy lab for me, and you had mentioned that you'd been teaching it for a couple years prior, I wanted to
hmm
know what your thoughts are on teaching this class.
Yeah, I have such a like place in my heart for Mammals Lab, and I don't really know exactly why. It's funny because I feel like it's just natural that I was drawn to teach this class and that I just found this really natural interest in learning about mammals through, this is totally have nothing to do with their DNA, but
Yeah.
actually learning about them through their morphology.
Yeah.
Um, because a lot of other people actually didn't want to teach this class. A lot of graduate students were like, no, that's too much
It is a lot.
because it
Yeah.
is a lot. Yeah, yeah, it is a lot. But I feel like once you learn it, it becomes so much more manageable. And then now every time I teach it, I am learning new things. Now I've developed this kind of cool foundation where I'm comfortable with, the group of mammals that we learn.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, there are so many more, right? Like we just barely scratch the surface
Exactly.
on what's out there. So now I have a nice little foundation, and each time I teach it, I learn new things about the animals that we teach about like the animals that live in those same environments. And I also just think it's so cool to see a skull and be able
Yes.
to know something about it.
Yes. It's crazy because ever since I took the class and I see all the squirrels running around my backyard, I now can confidently say I know the species name.
Yes, that's awesome. That is so great. I went on a camping journey this past weekend with my husband and some of our family members, and
Hmm.
I was probably so annoying because every time we would see a mammal or like a new mammal, I would say its scientific name. Like we saw elk, and I'm like, oh, Cervus canadensis,
Yes.
or
Yes.
yeah, or like what else we saw? Sea lions,
Oh,
Xolophus
wow.
californianus. That
Yeah.
was on the exam.
Yes, it was. And I know I got
um,
that one wrong.
oh dang it. But it is really cool how a class like that, right? It's hard. It's like so much memorization, so many connecting the
Yeah.
dots, especially with rodents and bats.
Oh my
Like it's
God, rodents.
really challenging, right? But then you go outside and somehow you feel just even a little bit more connected to what's around you. And that's so cool to me.
Yeah. I found it interesting how you could just look at the skull and figure out what animal it is. Whereas I
Yeah.
feel like with other species, or with other groups of animals, it's different because you can't really do that with birds and you can't really do that with reptiles and amphibians. And nor can you really do that with fish. I mean, I also took the lecture with it and it was just really
hmm
fascinating how like the evolution of mammals, how like the jawbone basically is our ear bone now, if that makes sense. And I just thought that was phenomenal and really cool. Evolution is awesome, but yeah.
It is. It's so cool. And even just the teeth, like the different kinds of teeth that an animal
Oh my
has,
God. Yeah.
says so much about the ecology of the animal.
Who knew that Vespertilionidae had horseshoe-shaped dentition? I never knew that
Right?
cat had a horseshoe-shaped jaw. It was creepy, but it was cool.
Yeah, super, super cool. But yeah,
Yes.
that's my that's kind of the most exciting things I feel like for me about the class. And also just like trying to make it more accessible each year. I feel like I learn more about students each year and
Mhm.
like try to make the information a little more accessible because everybody's coming in with different levels of prior knowledge.
Yeah.
And it's hard to even that playing field. But I do think it's like everybody can do it. It's really time consuming.
Yes, I studied a lot for this class.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than my other classes this quarter. But I'm happy I did because I'm happy with the grade and I feel like this knowledge is very useful and important to me.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly going to be important for you if you're going into like wildlife vet
Medicine.
med.
Yeah. That's so true. Yeah. So, anatomy and physiology. And
Hmm.
this was all anatomy, so yeah.
Yeah, which I mean, I'm sure you will find again, we just really scratched the surface. There's so much more there.
Yeah. I was at a clinic the other day and they were cleaning this dog's teeth and I was trying to count the dentition on the lower jaw.
Yes. Don't forget, you have to have the equals total number of teeth.
Yes. Yes, you do. And the canines. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, Julia.
Oh yeah, no problem.
This was fun.
Yeah, this was super fun. And please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. I will send you a link to my paper.
Awesome. I'll definitely
And
put it in the description of the video. Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
Very cool. Yep. Thank you.
1 second.